On a crisp morning in early 2025, the Vatican released a document that would ripple across the globe, stirring hearts, igniting debates, and prompting reflection among millions. Pope Francis, the 88-year-old pontiff known for his humility and unwavering commitment to the marginalized, had penned what many would call his final testament to humanity, a letter addressed not to a specific group, but to the entire world. Titled simply, A Call to Humanity, this letter, revealed just weeks before his passing on April 21, 2025, encapsulated the essence of his 12-year papacy. It was a clarion call for unity, compassion, and a radical reimagining of how humanity navigates its shared existence. What made this letter extraordinary was not just its content but its timing, written in the shadow of his deteriorating health and amidst the world grappling with division, conflict, and moral uncertainty. Pope Francis, born Jorge Mario Bergoglio in Argentina, was no stranger to speaking truth to power. From the moment he stepped onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica in 2013 as the first Latin American pope, he signaled a departure from tradition. He chose the name Francis, inspired by St. Francis of Assisi, the saint of poverty and peace, and lived accordingly, eschewing the opulent papal apartments for a modest guest house, driving a simple Fiat, and consistently advocating for the poor, the environment, and the disenfranchised. His papacy was marked by bold gestures, washing the feet of prisoners, welcoming refugees, and issuing encyclicals like Laudato Si, which framed climate change as a moral crisis. Yet, as he approached the twilight of his life, battling chronic respiratory issues and double pneumonia, Francis seemed to sense the urgency of delivering one final message, a synthesis of his teachings, a plea for humanity to course correct before it was too late. The letter, composed in late February 2025 while Francis was recovering from a 5-week hospitalization, was kept under wraps until its official release in early April. Vatican insiders described the process as deliberate, with Francis insisting on refining the text despite his frail condition. He dictated passages to aides when his voice faltered, and even as his mobility waned, he reviewed drafts with a meticulous eye. The result was a 15-page document translated into multiple languages that blended theological depth with accessible, almost poetic language. It was not a policy paper or a doctrinal treatise, but a heartfelt appeal, written as if Francis was speaking directly to each reader, regardless of faith or background. The letter opened with a reflection on the state of the world, painting a vivid picture of a planet at a crossroads. Francis described a wounded Earth, scarred by environmental degradation, economic inequality, and the madness of war. He pointed to specific crises, the ongoing conflict in Gaza, where he reiterated his Easter Sunday call for a ceasefire and the release of hostages, the mass displacement of migrants fleeing poverty and violence, and the rise of nationalism and populism, which he saw as threats to human dignity. Yet, his tone was not one of despair, but of hope grounded in action. "We are not condemned to repeat the mistakes of the past," he wrote. "Humanity is capable of greatness when it chooses love over fear, dialogue over division, and service over selfishness." Central to the letter was the theme of dignity, a cornerstone of Francis's moral vision. He argued that every person, regardless of status, possesses an infinite dignity that must be recognized and protected. This was not a new idea for Francis, who had long championed the marginalized, refugees, prisoners, the poor. But in the letter, he extended this principle to critique global systems. He condemned economic structures that prioritize profit over people, citing the exploitation of workers in developing nations and the concentration of wealth among a tiny elite. "When a child goes hungry while markets soar, we have lost our way," he wrote. He also took aim at the arms trade, calling it a black market of death that fuels conflicts and destabilizes communities. Francis's critique of political leadership was equally pointed. Without naming specific figures, he addressed the growing tide of anti-immigrant rhetoric, particularly in the United States, where he had clashed with the Trump administration over its deportation policies. In a February letter to US bishops, he had called the mass deportation program a disgrace that violated the dignity of migrants. In A Call to Humanity, he expanded this argument, urging leaders to reject policies rooted in fear and instead embrace the gospel's call to welcome the stranger. "To turn away the desperate is to turn away from God," he wrote, invoking the parable of the Good Samaritan. This stance, while consistent with his papacy, sparked controversy, with some conservative Catholics accusing him of overstepping into politics. Yet Francis remained unapologetic, insisting that faith demands engagement with the world's injustices. The letter also tackled the role of technology, a topic Francis had grown increasingly vocal about. He warned of the dual-edged nature of digital innovation, praising its potential to connect people but cautioning against its misuse. He criticized social media platforms for amplifying division and misinformation, urging users to seek truth over sensationalism. More strikingly, he addressed artificial intelligence, echoing concerns from his 2024 World Day of Peace message about the ethical risks of AI in warfare and surveillance. Technology must serve humanity, not enslave it, he wrote, calling for global cooperation to regulate emerging technologies. This forward-looking perspective underscored Francis's ability to engage with modern challenges while rooting his arguments in timeless principles. Perhaps the most poignant section of the letter was its focus on peace, a recurring theme of Francis's papacy. Dubbed the Pope of Peace, he had made countless appeals for dialogue over violence, from his visits to war-torn regions like South Sudan to his condemnation of arms proliferation. In the letter, he recounted his own experiences growing up in Argentina during turbulent times, reflecting on how those years shaped his belief in reconciliation. He called war a shipwreck of civilization and pleaded with world leaders to prioritize diplomacy. His words carried added weight given their timing, just days after his Easter Sunday blessing, where he condemned the deplorable situation in Gaza and called for an end to global conflicts. The letter's peace message resonated deeply, with many seeing it as a final plea from a man who knew his time was short. Francis also addressed the church itself, acknowledging its imperfections and the divisions within it. His papacy had been marked by turbulence, with progressive reforms like allowing blessings for same-sex couples and appointing women to Vatican roles, drawing ire from traditionalists. In the letter, he called for a church of the peripheries, one that moves beyond rigid dogmas to meet people where they are. He urged Catholics to resist the temptation to judge and instead embody compassion, particularly toward those who feel excluded. This vision of an inclusive church was both a defense of his legacy and a challenge to his successors, who would soon gather to elect a new pope. The letter's release was met with a global outpouring of emotion. In St. Peter's Square, pilgrims gathered to hear excerpts read aloud, many moved to tears by Francis's words. World leaders, from UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres to King Charles, praised the letter as a moral compass for troubled times. Social media platforms buzzed with quotes, particularly the line, "The future belongs to those who build bridges, not walls." Yet, reactions were not universally positive. Some political commentators, particularly in the US, dismissed the letter as naive, arguing that its calls for open borders and disarmament ignored practical realities. Others accused Francis of alienating conservative Catholics by prioritizing social issues over doctrine. These criticisms, however, did little to dim the letter's impact as millions shared and discussed its message online. For Francis, the letter was a personal milestone. Written in the aftermath of a near-fatal bout of pneumonia, it reflected his awareness of his mortality. Vatican sources reported that he viewed it as his last word, a way to distill his teachings into a single universal message. His health had been precarious since February 2025, when he was hospitalized for 38 days, and though he made surprise appearances in April, including a moving Easter blessing, his strength was fading. The letter's release just weeks before his death gave it an almost prophetic quality, as if Francis were preparing the world for his departure. When news of his passing broke on April 21, 2025, the letter took on even greater significance. Cardinal Kevin Farrell, announcing Francis's death, described it as the culmination of a life dedicated to the service of the Lord and his church. Tributes poured in, with many citing the letter as evidence of Francis's enduring legacy. In Buenos Aires, where he was born, thousands gathered to honor the Pope of the slums, while in Rome, the Vatican prepared for his funeral and the conclave to choose his successor. The letter, now circulating in countless languages, became a touchstone for mourning and reflection, its words quoted in homilies, editorials, and personal conversations. In the end, a call to humanity was more than a letter. It was a mirror held up to the world, asking each person to confront their role in shaping the future. Francis, with his characteristic humility, did not claim to have all the answers. Instead, he offered a vision of a world where dignity triumphs over division, where peace prevails over conflict, and where humanity chooses hope over despair. As the church entered a new chapter and the world grappled with its challenges, his words lingered, a quiet but powerful reminder that change begins with the courage to care.